ALA Public Programs Office. Thank you for joining us for this webinar, which is part of the ALA Great Stories Club on Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, and it's made possible by grants from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and the National Endowment for the Humanities. Per our messages to the discussion list and through email, this session is being recorded and it will be shared with other grantees who were not available to attend the live presentation. If there's any reason that you have any concerns about that, please feel free to disconnect and you will be welcome to access the archive instead. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this online gathering, which brings together our newest TRHT Great Stories Club cohort, the project directors from 35 libraries that will host a series on the theme Growing Up Brave. All of us on the project team at ALA and our partner organizations are so excited to have your involvement with this project. Thank you all for taking the time to prepare your proposals, to plan your programs, and to engage with us to bring these books, conversations, and unique opportunities for partnership and connection to young people in your unique communities. We are looking forward to seeing everyone in Chicago for our orientation workshop in the next 2 weeks. We will have 2 days together, but it's a very busy agenda and it never really seems like quite enough time to cover everything, which is one reason why we have asked you to participate in today's Racial Healing Circle Methodology webinar. Mimoa and Monica Haslip are racial healing practitioners who have received training with the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and they serve as consultants to the foundation. They're here with us today to provide everyone with an overview first of TRHT, Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, as envisioned by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Then following that, they will speak with you about the core elements of a racial healing circle, which each of you will experience on Friday morning of the workshop in Chicago. Me and Monica's presentation will provide important context for the circle experience and will be followed by about 30 minutes of Q&A. And on that note, here are just a few instructions for communication in our Zoom classroom. If you have any kind of technical issue, please use the Q&A window at the bottom of your screen to communicate with Samantha Oakley. Sam in the Public Programs Office is with us providing tech support today. To send a message through Q&A, just move your cursor to the bottom of the window and click Q&A. We ask that you don't put technical questions in the chat because we're going to use that space for conversation and interaction with the presentation content. Sam can respond to technical issues as quickly as possible, but don't panic if you're having trouble. We will give you access to the archive. For the Q&A session, everyone will have the ability to submit questions via the chat feature. Although questions will only be taken during the Q&A period, please feel free to add yours to the chat anytime that works for you. If you choose to enable access to your webcam and your microphone, you can also ask questions this way during the Q&A period. Please note that all participant microphones have been muted for the presentation, just for the best audio experience. And then during Q&A, I believe Samantha's going to open up your microphone access, but we do ask everyone to mute it if you're not speaking, just so we don't get feedback. And I think that's it. Thank you all again for being with us. And now it's my pleasure to hand the microphone over, I think, to Monica. Are you going to start or me? Me or Monica, who will work together. Me and Monica, thank you so much for being with us today and for all of the incredible support and expertise that you have so very generously provided to ALA as part of the project. Thanks.
Great.
Monica, you want to kick us off?
I'm gonna let you go and then I'll follow up.
All right, all right. So first of all, on both of our behalf, and as we each, I think there are only 2 slides. So Monica are going to take turns each speaking on each of these slides, and then we'll both chime in to answer questions. And I'm going to talk about the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, or the TRHT framework slide. I know Lainey has done a wonderful job of providing context for us, and I'm very excited to be here on the call, and Monica and I both look forward to meeting each of you on the 4th when we come and co-facilitate the Racial Healing Circle with you. We both offer our congratulations to each of you and your libraries for being a part of this journey with us. We're very excited to be a part of the ALA family, and we've been from the very beginning when ALA became part of the TRHT family, and so we're just very excited and are deeply appreciative to Lainey, Samantha, Brian, Jody, and the ALA family for continuing to involve us with all of you. Our hope today is to give you a little bit of a context or background about the TRHT framework, giving rise to the racial healing and racial healing circle practice, and then we'll walk you through what the racial healing circle experience is going to look like or feel like, in a way to give you a preview about what it is that you're going to be experiencing when you meet up with us again on the 4th. I'll start by talking about the framework. So Monica and I were invited to be a part of a group of almost, I think there are 150 organizations with varying members who are part of the initial group that were brought together by Dr. Gail Christopher, who at the time was a senior vice president at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, to help the foundation think about their next step or where they wanted to go. They have been for almost a decade at the leading edge of doing work on racial equity, transitioning into their America Healing Initiative, and they wanted to take it a step further. And so under Dr. Gail Christopher's leadership, she brought together a large group of us to help her think and to help frame what a bigger, broader framework would need to look like in order to permanently and sustainably transform our community and our lives in this country. In essence, how do we move away from what we're living under in terms of the consequences of racism today? How do we move beyond that? And into a space where we have permanently and sustainably, in Dr. Gail Christopher's words, jettisoned this, what she calls the hierarchy of human values, or the policies and practices and institutions of racism that continue to influence and shape our daily lives. And the result of that work is what is known today as the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Framework, which is summarized on the chart that's in front of you. At the top, you will see the words narrative change. Underneath narrative change are a number of boxes. These are what we call points of leverage, or places that shape and influence how we speak truth to power. These are the places that shape the narratives, the stories about who we are and who our communities are. These are the spaces that define for us the images and visuals, right? That defines for us, or that shape for all of us who we are and what we are. So those are what those boxes are for. But the most critical pillar is a narrative change. Underneath that is racial healing and relationship building. And the essence of that pillar is that in order for us to be able to craft public policies, in order for us to do systems change work, which are separation, the law, and the economy, and to make those changes sustainable, we need to both heal and we need to build and strengthen the trust and the relationships that are necessary for us to one, build enough of a public will to really craft the changes that we need in order to permanently do away with racism or racial injustice in this country. And equally as important, we need to recognize that because we've all lived under the consequences of racism for so long, that there's a lot of brokenness in our relationships with each other, and that the healing component is really critical and really important, both personally as well as interpersonally. So racial healing and relationship building in some ways is a foundational practice, a foundational piece for us to be able to get to the dismantling and the systems change work that we need to do. Then the other three pillars are separation, the law, and the economy. And these three pillars recognize and acknowledges the day-to-day work that we are all doing on a daily basis. Separation has to do with the types of practices and policies from the beginning of time that have operated to support as well as to perpetuate racism in this country, right? Segregation, colonization, segregation in housing, segregation in communities, right? The law, I mean, think about the public policies that have been created over time, right? That not only established, but put in place injustices and practices that continues to perpetuate racism in this country. In particular, things like criminal justice policy, juvenile justice policies, educational policies, many of which undergirds and also supports the separation practices that we live under. And then finally, the economy recognizes the economic injustices, the inequities that from the very beginning of the establishment of this country, the basis of the creation of the inequities was the idea that some of us were more superior than others. Some of us were owners of others. And the fact of the matter is that the economy, right, that sense of that ownership, and the entire legacy of enslavement in this country was built on. In fact, it created a whole host of economic inequities that continues up until today, right? And in modern day, you look at the wage inequities, you look at income inequities, it very much falls along race and ethnic lines. And so the separation, the law, and the economy recognizes or look at what we call the symptoms of racism. And while myself included, many of us have been working with, wanted to change public policies, in those buckets of desegregation and decriminalization and, you know, trying to end the wage gap. Sometimes it feels like we're just churning in place. And so the task of the TRHT or the TRHT framework is what has been missing that has stood in the way of us being able to permanently make changes in the law, in separation and economy. And where we've landed is that two very fundamental areas are the narrative change and racial healing and relationship, that we need to be able to tell the truth. Now, in this day and age of people operating with alternative facts, right? Reasonable people can debate about what is the truth, but we know that there is a fundamental truth. And that fundamental truth is that we are all part of one human family. And in order to get to a permanent, transformed state where we actually are able to live with each other in community and as brothers and sisters, right? We need to be able to speak to that truth and be able to recognize that truth. So narrative change, being able to tell the truthful story, being able to come face to face with the truth and the reality of the legacies that we're living under, but also being able to imagine the alternative narrative of how we could live as a community. That's the power of narrative change, right? And then the most critical piece is the racial healing and the relationship building piece, that we can't get to a place of being able to imagine what our world as part of the human family could look like, unless and until we're willing to consent to being on this journey of healing with ourselves, but healing with each other, and start to strengthen the trust we have for each other and to build the relationship with one another that is necessary to build the coalition, to start to head towards, you know, a vision of how we co-liberate or how we co-create a world that we are all a part of. So that, in a nutshell, is what the TRHT framework is about. It starts with the base of the narrative change, racial healing and relationship building, and then work towards separation of the law and the economy. And what Monica and I have been doing with the ALA is to do a lot of the work around the racial healing relationship building. And what you are all doing in terms of the books and the stories that you are sharing with the young people at your libraries is taking on a little piece of the narrative change piece. But the Racial Healing Circle is the essential tool that we have crafted to support the racial healing and relationship building piece of the TRHT framework. So I will leave it at that and transition to Monica to walk us through now what a racial healing circle is, what it looks like, to just give you a sneak peek into what you will be experiencing with us when we see you on October 4th.
Thank you, Mee. So on October 4th, you know, me and I will have the great fortune of co-facilitating a racial healing circle for you. And what we want to do right now is to sort of take you through what that experience would involve. So, you know, the circle experience, we believe, is the anchor to the framework that Mee just talked about. So it begins with a welcome and self-introduction. And that welcome is really designed for us to set the intention of the circle and to create that space of trust and to provide the opportunity for us to talk about our objectives for the day. And we will do brief introductions of everybody in the circle, because it's really important as we sort of go into the circle that we have the opportunity as co-facilitators to introduce ourselves to you, to bring our intention for anchoring the space to the circle at the beginning of the circle, and to also let you know what the objectives are for the circle. And from there, we move into the group agreements. And the group agreements really are what we call our touchstones. And touchstones we've used, you know, in almost every circle that really helps us as a collective group determine what our agreements are for the day in terms of the way that we communicate with each other and the things that we believe are important for kind of creating the kind of trusting environment that we want to have in order to share our truth. And those touchstones get expanded because we create an opportunity for you to add to the list of agreements that we bring. So we make sure that all of us have included the things that we believe are important to ensure that the space feels safe and that you can tell your truth. From the touchstones, we move into the reintroductory exercise and a full sort of group reflection. The reintroductory exercise is really designed for us to sort of have an opportunity for you to have a deeper introduction to one another. So there are a couple of quick questions that are presented. You'll have a couple of minutes to respond to those questions. And this is the area where we start to focus a little bit on the importance of having a moment to speak your truth and also recognizing how important deep listening is. So we spend a lot of time really focusing on helping us to be in a space of honoring the person's truth that you'll be sharing your story with, and also listening deeply from your heart and not your head. So those exercises you'll do together. We'll have a couple of questions that'll last maybe 5 minutes or so. And from there, we come back into full circle. where you get a chance as a group to do a reflection on those questions that we asked in the reintroductory. And this is an opportunity for us collectively to begin to see where the connections are, how things resonate with you from the stories of others. So we'll highlight some of the stories that were shared in the small groups, in the pairs, in the full circle, so you'll have the opportunity to reflect and determine, what stories resonate with you. Because the primary goal for us in this is to deepen relationships and to have opportunities to speak truth and to learn to listen deeply. After the reintroductory exercise, we'll move into the deep reflection prompt. The deep reflection prompt is really sort of the heart of the circle. That's where we go into a deeper heart space. It's an opportunity for us to share a prompt that has been designed that will allow you to work in dyads, and you and your partner will be, predetermined, and you'll do the same thing in essence that you did with the reintroductory exercise, but you'll just have, you'll be paired with someone that has been identified as your partner. You will actually have more time, and this time, instead of having 2 minutes like you had in the reintroductory exercise, you'll have 5 minutes, each to respond to the question. And we'll do the same thing we did with the reintroductory exercise by sharing each for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back to the full circle for reflection. And what our goal is to move around the circle and offer an opportunity for everyone who's interested in sharing their story in the full group to actually have the opportunity to do that. Because this is the point at which we began to see those connections. And the goal is for us to use these opportunities to hear the truth of others and to find those connections and things that resonate. The dyads are really what I talked about before when we were, you'll be put together in the dyads prior to going out and doing your 5-minute response to the prompt question. And then the final thing is the synthesis and closing. And the synthesis and closing is really, designed for us to actually have the opportunity to connect to the experience that we just had together. And in many cases, the co-facilitators have things that range from sharing poems or create opportunities for participants to reflect on words that highlight the experience that they just had prior to closing. And in essence, that is the core elements of the racial healing circles. And we really look forward to sharing that experience with you all, and want to open it up for any questions you may have on the framework or the core elements.
I have a question. This is Jennifer in Juneau, and I'm wondering if the intention of doing the racial healing circle is ultimately for us to kind of organize our sessions with our young adults in using kind of the same format.
The idea, I mean, I think I'll let Lainey, I don't know, if, I'll let you respond to, from ALA's perspective, how ALA wants to, would like you to incorporate the racial healing circle. What we do know is that we are offering you the circle experience, and you could, in whole, I think in the past, the ALA has been willing to put on a training session where those of you who are interested in hosting, in using the racial healing circle process with your young people, you're able to do that. If you live in a place where we, you know, Monica and I, in the last, I don't know, three years or so, I think collectively, it's not just us, but our other racial healing circle practitioners, partners, together, I think we've trained almost over 500, if not 600 racial healing circle practitioners. And so our hope is that to give you an experience for you to see what the methodology feels like to you. There might be an opportunity for you yourself to be in a training opportunity to learn the methodology. If you're already a very experienced facilitator, it might be, you might be able to just, through this experience, pick it up and say, there are elements of this that I can use. I know that Lainey has asked a number of us to come up with deep reflection prompt questions for some of the books that you all are will be using. And so the hope is that, yes, whether, you know, on your own, whether you bring in an experienced racial healing circle practitioner that may be in your geographic area, and if you want to, you definitely could and should use the racial healing circle methodology with your young people. Or you could take components of the racial healing circle methodology and use it continuously, like whether it is in your libraries, among the librarians, or, you know, with young people that you work with. You could use the touchstones, or, you know, there are different aspects of it. But I think the hope is that as you become comfortable with it, that you would think about and you will consider using the racial healing circle as part of the work that you're doing with the young people.
Thank you.
And I think one of the things you'll find too is that there is flexibility in the experience, particularly as you start to work with young people in using the circle as a tool, that once you have this circle experience, you might see a variety of different elements, like you just mentioned, that can be utilized, or that can be expanded on based on some of the things that you're currently doing that might fit inside of sort of the circle experience.
That's great. I'll just say a little bit more. This is Jennifer again, and part of the why I applied for this ALA grant was to work with Alaska Native students in a local high school, and there are people in our town that I believe it's the same kind of Kellogg Foundation based training. They do something in town called Andori training, which is Alaska Native Dialogues on Racial Equity. So part of the grant that I put into the grant was to get training on Andori over this year. So I'm really excited to be a part of this in Chicago, and then see how that, I think there's going to be a lot of similarities to the Alaska Native dialogues, but maybe more specifically talking about challenges in the Alaska Native community.
So Jennifer, I think both Monica and I are familiar with the folks in Alaska. Our friend Liz Medicine Crow has been a teacher and a contributor to the creation of the Racial Healing Circle methodology from the very beginning. And they are doing a lot of the Racial Healing Circle work in Alaska. So I think I'm so excited that you're connecting with them, and even if it's not Liz's group, we're happy to make sure that we connect you to her, because they're through Liz and her organization, there are lots of there's already a lot of really good resources. And what we love about the Racial Healing Circle practice is that we offer the opportunity for folks who resonate with the practice. We, through the ALA, we've offered opportunities for folks to be part of a training or preparation workshop. But we also know that you all deal with different audiences and different populations in each of your unique geographic areas. And we also have friends who are practitioners, right? From the Native American community, from the Latino community, from the Native Alaskan Native Hawaiian community. This practice came together through the contributions of great healers and practitioners who came from all of those different traditions. And so there will be a lot of similarities as you go out there, and particularly to the Native Alaskan community. I think it'd be great to explore that, because I know that lots of really great people are doing this work in Alaska with really honoring and bringing in the elements of the indigenous tradition and culture, right, into the practice in order to make this relevant to the communities that this practice is supposed to be serving. And so as a practitioner, Monica and I are always very cognizant that on paper, it's a methodology, but really the responsibility for those of us who are practitioners is how do we adapt this methodology for it to be relevant to the people that the circle is meant to serve. And so if it's a population of young people, we have to be thoughtful about how we adapt this methodology to make it relevant to this population of young people, so that they have a meaningful experience. And it may be in the form of the type of questions that we use. Right? It might be in the form of, maybe it doesn't change any of these elements, but we have to be thoughtful about the kinds of questions we use or how we facilitate, being creative about how we facilitate the circle process so that everybody feels that they can meaningfully engage and participate. So I love your point about connecting with the folks on the ground in Alaska who are doing this work.
It looks like we have a question in the chat from Deidre. Could you tell me more about the dyads and how they help in larger groups?
So, the dyads are usually sort of curated in the planning process where, we look at trying to put people together that have a very sort of diverse pairing. So we look at everything from gender, race, race and ethnicity, and age, because the goal is to really create dyads that have pairs that are not obviously the same. And so, there's a, sometimes if we work with groups that have people who are coming from one particular culture, then we look for other elements that may be different, like, geography. It could be a variety of things, but the goal for the dyad pairing is really trying to put people together who might not be have similar backgrounds, so that there is this connection and this opportunity for people to experience resonance and see their common humanity as a result of sharing their truth and actually listening to one another deeply. So the dyads are really important, and they're a very thoughtful part of what happens in the planning process. Did that answer your question?
Yes, she says, thank you. It was very illuminating.
Yes.
Hello, this is Sarah from Slover Library in Norfolk, Virginia. And I don't know if it's sort of a question, but I've been approaching the idea of having a racial healing circle with my young people using art as a, I don't know, as a way to get them to talk about things with each other. I find that some of my teens have an easier time expressing themselves visually before they start opening up about things. Is there any prompt questions that you could think that would maybe help kind of bring that together, if you understand what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, I work high school here in Chicago, and I run an arts organization. So this work for me has been fully integrated into the work that I do every day. And I think that a part of what we've tried to do is to invite young people to be have a meaningful seat at the table as we plan for the circles that we have here. And they help us to really identify relevant questions that they believe could help to deepen the relationships between them and their peers. So that's one thing that we've done, which is really to just not engage them as participants, but also engage them in the planning process, because things that appear to be interesting and exciting to us as adults are not necessarily always what's interesting and exciting to young people. So, their engagement at that level is important, but also, there are opportunities to bring art into the circle experience in a variety of different ways. What's beautiful about this process is that you get to bring, who you are, as well as other things that you believe could help to set the intention of the space. So at the beginning of many of the circles that me and I do together, I do a deep listening exercise using music. And in circles that I have done here with my students in the high school, we brought in different materials and allowed them to answer a question and build something that was an example of their answer to that question. So I think you can be as creative as you can imagine in an environment like the circle, because I think the circle is really designed to deepen trust. And everybody, there are a variety of different ways that happens, particularly with young people. So finding ways to integrate art, I believe, is a really wonderful element that gets included in a different, whether it's the introductory portion where people are doing their self-introductions and you give them something that they can use to say who they are visually. So, that's one example of things that you can do. And, I think the more creative you are in that way, with young people, the better the experience is for them.
Sarah, I co-facilitated a circle with a group of young people. And one of the things that we did as part of the deep reflection prompt was, and it all is time dependent, right? If you only have 90 minutes to do a circle, it doesn't give you very much time. But if you want to be really intentional about building some kind of art component into this, you may have to dedicate a 3.5 hour circle. And the reason why I said that is because in this circle that I co-facilitated for young people, we did use, we didn't do like a visual art piece, but we did a poetry piece. And for the deep reflection prompt, what we asked them to do was, as a dyad pair, for them, if they were going to write a story or a poem about who they are, that they had to spend enough time to get to know each other, where they grew up, what their likes are, what their dislikes are, and then out of the information that they learned about each other, to craft a short story or a poem or some kind of narrative that reflect the things that they've discovered about each other. And then when we came back into the larger group, that gave them an opportunity to read out loud, right, their poem or their story, to share that with the group. And what I found really helpful about that is that you're absolutely right. I think for young people, for us as adults, we can ask a question about, share with us a moment when you came face to face with your own bias or racism, right? As adults, we are trained to try to respond to those kind of prompts. But for a lot of young people, I think if we ask the question directly, they sit there like a deer in the headlight, and they, one, they may not have enough life experience to be able to answer that, or two, it may feel to them like it's too much to disclose in a peer setting, right? And so I love the idea of incorporating the arts. I mean, you could have them go off and paint a picture that represents a particular prompt that you want to put out there, and then have them come back and share their painting, and talk about what does that represent to them in their lives. So the only caution I would say is that when we do things like that, you have to really be conscious about planning and the amount of time that you dedicate to the experience, so that it can be as full as you need it to be, to give the students or the young people the amount of time they need in order to be able to reflect and then to share out.
Right. And really I'm hoping that with each book, they'll be able to complete an art piece, or like you said, a poem, or something like that, so that when they come together for the final racial healing circle with the practitioner, they'll be able to have that time beforehand to actually share themselves without actually having to use words. They'll be able to have that exhibit of their work, and then that can lead to connections that might not necessarily need to be verbal.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you very much for your answer.
And I think that's a good example too of how the Racial Healing Circle helps to complement other things, you know, something that you might already be implementing, or but you know, you have something that is leading up to the circle, that's an activity that also sort of deepens and strengthens relationships. So once the circle happens, you know, that process has already gotten started.
Great. So we've had a few questions trickle in the chat. So Rachel is wondering if you have any materials or tips for professional racial healing therapists. Our library will be working with one all school year.
Racial healing.
You already have somebody that you're working with? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with racial healing therapy, actually. So what Monica and I say is that, you know, as lay people, so we're not therapists, and those of us who do racial healing circles, we want to be very explicit and upfront that we are circle facilitators, the circle co-facilitators. We create compassionate spaces where we invite people to share themselves, their stories, and their life experiences. But we also, unless, right, there's a professional services that you guys have built into it, we also caution folks that they need to be aware, right? And particularly for young people, each of you will need to think about how you plan for and how you'll respond, because I believe that depending on whoever is in the circle and who are the co-facilitators, some of you may be mandatory reporters. And so, you know, there needs to be a discussion amongst yourselves that if you are co-facilitating, you have grown-ups in the circle who are co-facilitating, who are present in the circle. And as you invite young people to disclose, you know, do you want to be really upfront about that we are inviting you to share yourselves, to share reflections of yourselves, that we need to be really explicit about whether the circle process is about self-expression, right? Saying, this is who I want to be. This is what I am. This is what I appreciate about myself. It's about strengthening and self-expression. Or are we also experiencing asking people to share life challenges that they've encountered, and the kind of drawing attention to the kind of resiliency, right, that they've, and celebrate the resiliency that they've been able to overcome, and using that as a stepping stone to build and strengthen their confidence to sort of bravely move into the future. So depending on how you want to frame the theme of your racial healing circle, we are always very upfront that the intention of the racial healing circle is about sharing stories and life experiences in order for us to get to our sense of a common humanity with one another. But in the circle process, we are not therapists and we're not prepared, right? The circle process is not a therapy circle. And so I think that this is a really important question, and it is something that we've already, you know, we've identified and highlighted for Lainey and the ALA, that working with young people is a little bit different than working with adults, because we need to be cognizant that, one, it's not a therapy circle and we're not professionals, but two, if we're in the circle and we're mandatory reporters, we need to be, I think, truthful and honest with the young people about or, you know, share with them your policies if something comes up in the disclosure process, how you're going to do the follow-up. And that plays into how do you gingerly balance, right, the trust building in the circle to get people to be willing to disclose without feeling like, you know, they might inadvertently disclosing something that will have any kind of consequences that they're not prepared for. And so I would encourage each of you, and I'm sure this is part of the 2 days of workshop that you all will be engaging in, but just wanna highlight that that we don't hold ourselves out as therapists in the racial healing circle. and nor are we prepared, right, to deal with things that may come up. And so as you all think about it, you may have to think about what's your contingency if something does come up and it needs a follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
And I
think even,
sorry. Go ahead, Monica.
I was just going to quickly say in the group agreement area of the touchstones, when we invite people to add any agreements, one of the things that I often add with adults is only share what you can carry, which, really is my signal to say that, we're inviting the participants to share what they believe that they can leave the room with, because we are not therapists, and the circle is not designed that way. But I think it's a little bit more complicated to, in making that statement. I make that statement to adults and they understand what I mean in most cases. And with young people, we have to find another way to say the same thing in ways to ensure that they are mindful and protecting their own stories in a way that they don't feel that they have an experience and they're leaving without the kind of support that they need. So I think that is something that we have to be mindful of and find ways to make sure that they are aware of what to expect from the circle. And also the planning. I can't re-emphasize how important the planning is to making sure that we are designing prompts that really invite young people to celebrate the things that they have sort of moved beyond, as opposed to being going really, really deep into a space of pain or discomfort with no way to talk about the resilience. I think the resilience element of the prompt design in the planning process for young people is really, really important to make sure that there's a way for them to answer questions that allow them to see how they are empowered and how they are resilient, as opposed to them really feeling like they're leaving the circle with something that's heavy that they have not been able to have addressed.
First, I just wanted to say thank you to both of you, because that context is so, so important. I see in the chat, Rachel made a comment following her original question that says we were asked to locate someone as part of the grant application. Rachel, I don't know your proposal offhand, but I'm going to guess that there may just be some jargon issue there, that you've worked with someone who you're using who's a racial healing practitioner who's going to convene a circle. And a practical answer to your question is just that we have prompts that have been developed for all the books in this series. So those are tools that you may want to convey to the person that you're working with. They have been designed for youth and they do touch on the books, so that might be a good tool. And then I think we would also be able to share, me and Monica put together for some of the more in-depth training we've provided for librarians to learn to co-facilitate circles. And it's almost sort of a structure that walks you through sort of planning a circle, the steps of planning a circle based on the allotted time. It's kind of modular and lets you, it's just a planning tool. And that's something that we could also share that you might be able to use with the person you've selected to work with your library for the year.
Great. So we have about 5 minutes left in the session. So I think it's time for one more question from the chat. So Lear, could you share a specific example of a deep listening exercise with music?
Well, typically I bring my speakers and I invite the participants to really, I talk a little bit about the difference between head listening and heart listening, and the importance of being able to understand that listening is really connected to intention. And so I play music, invite the participants to listen and identify specific sounds inside of that song. And then from there, I ask them to find a different sound. And we play that music for about 1.5 to 2 minutes. And we come back into full circle and really talk about what it felt like to identify a specific sound and then be asked to find a new sound. Because what we're trying to do is to help people understand that listening also provokes feeling. So that that exercise really has over time been amazing, because people began to see that, you know, they can direct their listening. So what we invite people to do in the circle is to really focus and have the intention of listening with their hearts for the purpose of feeling, as opposed to what we normally do, which is sort of listening with our heads, where, you know, a person may say something and you're thinking about something else. And so the music exercise really helps to heighten the understanding that we have the opportunity to choose whether we are listening deeply or not, and also recognize that in listening, there's an opportunity for us to feel something. And so that's really an example of the type of deep listening exercise that we do as a group. And people really get a chance to see that there are a variety of things that they feel and things that they remember, their feelings that take them back to a certain place. And there are all kinds of things that come up when they understand that they are listening with intention, as opposed to, and listening with their hearts instead of just listening with their heads. So that's one music exercise that I do almost in every circle. And I choose different music depending on, you know, what I really want to invite people to explore.
We have about 2 minutes left. There's one more question that I hope might be a short answer, and then we can close up. And I apologize for not knowing this already, but me and Monica, are you going to be with us over lunch in Chicago during the day in case people had follow-up questions that they wanted to connect with you about? Will you be there?
I'm happy to. I haven't bought my airplane ticket yet, so I'll make sure that I am able to accommodate that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be there too.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so the last question that popped up is just, have you found that you listen with your heart more frequently during your day with doing this work? And we'll close out with that one.
I'll start by saying that since I have been on this journey and engaging in this work with Monica and with other practitioners, I am just a much nicer, better, gooder human being. And I truly have discovered what it means to be a deep listener in myself. And I have recognized that in others who engage in deep listening. And so, yes, on my own personal journey, I feel like as I'm doing this work for others, I myself have also gained a lot out of the experience.
Yeah, and I'm an artist. And one of the reasons why I, you know, sort of went on the deep listening sort of area, it was because I I felt that it was an opportunity for me to grow. And so I'm much more conscious now when I go into a state of head listening, when someone's speaking to me and I'm thinking about something else. I'm much more conscious of that. And I think the deep listening exercises has really helped me to have stronger and more meaningful relationships with people that I'm around every day, particularly at work. So yes, I think it's actually had a real meaningful influence in my life.
Thank you both. We're right at 1 o'clock. Thanks to all of you for joining us. We will send out those files and a link to the archive, I believe today. Thank you so much to Sam for taking care of our tech and moderating our questions for us. We're looking forward to seeing everyone in Chicago.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Me and Monica, do you have maybe 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
should we? Okay.